in our search for the good life. We have met professors, authors, scientists, many different people and cultures, and learned a lot about the many elements that make up a good and happy life. It's time to sum it all up and find the best tip from maximizing your happiness. And what better way to do that than to visit the place where all the world's scientifically correct findings about happiness are gathered, the Netherlands, and the World Database of Happiness. The database was founded in 1980 by Professor Ruut Veenhoven to help scientists around the world find all the scientifically correct data in happiness research.
I throw away about 60%. That is studies that claim to be about life satisfaction, but actually measure something else.
In this episode, we explore how much of our happiness we're able to control, and how much is controlled by our genes, or by our age. And we explore some of the more unique and surprising findings about happiness.
A lot of people get happier when they get children, but not everybody.
We're two Danes sailing around the world to meet people, visit places, and explore the science behind what a good life is. All this at 10 kilometers an hour. Please join us as we explore life. From our many conversations with people around the world, it's clear that there are many thoughts and ideas about what happiness is. It can sometimes be hard to find a way through it all.
You should make a difference between what people think that make them happy and what actually makes them happy. It's like asking people what makes you healthy. And if you had asked that question to my grandfather, then he would have said, well, yeah, good, grassy food. He died from a heart attack. He was wrong, and a lot of people are also wrong about what will make them happy.
Yes, unfortunately, a high-energy diet is not as healthy as we once thought. Thanks to research, we now know much more about health.
We are very good in curing diseases because we did a lot of research. And as a result, we live now longer than ever before in human history. Well, if you want to promote happiness, you should do the same. You should investigate what makes people happy, and all that research should be gathered. And that's what I do in the World Database of Happiness.
The database is free of charge and used by scientists and governments around the world for things like optimizing tax or healthcare systems to maximize the return on well-being for their populations. The database contains many interesting findings. We have covered quite a few of them in our earlier episodes. But one of the more surprising findings that we haven't covered yet is children. We have spoken with many people about children, including Mateoa from Fakarava. He thinks that having children has added something new and positive to his life. It feels great to think about someone else than yourself. However, the relationship between children and happiness is not always straightforward.
If you look at the scientific data, you see that people who get children actually become a bit less happy. At least on average, there is a price on having children. The main dip is actually when the child is pretty small. And there is sometimes also a dip when children leave home and the empty nest. But typically people get happier when the children have left home.
Here it's very important to underline the fact that this is an average, and there are a lot of differences.
Children give meaning to your life, but at the same time they can lower your happiness a bit. And indeed there is a lot of difference. Women for which motherhood is the main thing in life, they typically get happier when they become a mother. Whereas women who also want to have a career get a bit less happy.
There is indeed a lot of differences, And, as Ruut reminded us, there is more to life than just happiness. And children can really give you life meaning.
If you have a family, there will also be drawbacks, then still it is something to do for the next generation, give meaning to your life. And we don't live for happiness alone.
Another very interesting topic is how much of our happiness we're able to control, and how much is controlled by our genes.
What you see today in countries like Denmark is that about 30% of the differences in happiness has a genetic basis. But that will not always be the same. The better the environment, the happier the people, but the more the differences are genetic. And so if we are in hell, whatever genes you are, everybody is unhappy. If we are in heaven, well, everybody is happy, but there are a few losers who score only 9. Well, and that difference is 100% genetic.
Unfortunately, we're genetically not all capable of experiencing the same level of happiness. But if we put a bit of effort into improving our happiness, then as our happiness increases, our genes will mean less and less. But there is one thing that we can never escape: our age.
People think, well, the older you get, the less happy you will be. And yes, that is true in a lot of countries, especially in poor countries. But in our world, we see another pattern, the so-called U pattern. You're happy if you're young and a student, then you go in your 30s, 40s, you have a job, you have a mortgage, you have children. And then it's a bit lower, and then the mortgage is paid out and children leave home. Then you also have more freedom. So the best days are typically between 50 and 70. And then, well, you get ill. Then there is a slight dip. But even surprisingly, how happy people are on their deathbed.
Where's the bottom of the U shape?
Yeah, you're at the bottom.
Well, we know and understand that this sailing trip around the world might just look like the biggest midlife crisis ever. But it wasn't really driven by a crisis, but more by a wish to try to live a different type of everyday life. Now, based on all the knowledge in the database, what's the best advice for improving our happiness?
If you look at the happiness advice industry, most of it are advices that apply to everybody, like the medicine against all diseases. Don't believe these. But there is another kind of happiness advice that typically helps you to monitor how you feel. And so each day you monitor, what did I do yesterday? How did I feel when the alarm clock went off? How did I feel at breakfast? How did I feel when I went to bed? And it gives you a clearer view on how much you like the things you do. You can also compare with other people who use the tool. And if these people, for instance, score better at work than you do, then maybe it's time to look for another job.
We have touched upon this point before, the benefit of being more attentive to what you like to do. In a way, it's quite simple. Happiness is very much like health. It's decided by a mixture of our genes, our environment, and our behavior. And just as we put a lot of effort into staying physically healthy by keeping track of our weight, eating healthy and exercising, we should put a bit of that same effort into staying mentally healthy and happy. So the best way to maximize your happiness is by paying attention to the things you like doing in your daily life. Not all can be changed, but maybe some of the things can. That's where you start. And if you like, there are apps to help you out, just like there are apps for tracking your sleep, your exercise, and physical health. And if you don't like apps, then consider some of the many other options we have covered in our earlier episodes. From here on, it's up to you. Now we will end our search with one of the happiest findings in the world database of happiness.
After the Industrial Revolution, when the new society provides more freedom and a better economy, we live longer, and since the 1960s we can also see that happiness is growing, and so my conclusion is that we live now longer and happier than ever before in human history.